Speaking now to MK Party spokesperson Nhlamulo Ndhlela, who joins us on the line. Nhlamulo, good evening. Good to have you.
Good evening. You sound very distant, so just finding it a bit difficult to hear you.
All right, we're improving that sound. Is it getting better now?
Not necessarily.
Still not? Okay, let's keep trying. So it seems from your papers, I mean, of course, they are in two parts. There's part A and there's part B, but you are largely focusing on part A for part B to be dealt with a little bit later. In part A, you are contending with Section 46 and its interpretation, as well as Section 51 and its interpretation. One has got to do with whether or not the composition of the National Assembly and the Constitution of the National Assembly are the same thing. What's your understanding and your interpretation?
Well, I'll respond, but I could hardly hear what you were asking. But let me just give you my understanding of what you've just asked. If I heard you properly, Thabo, you're referring to Section 46 in terms of composition of the National Assembly.
Yeah.
Now, our lawyers will argue that we believe that with Mkhonto weSizwe, in effect, not being part of the sitting of the National Assembly would effectively leads to the below threshold of 350 members of the National Assembly. And I think what is also key to highlight is that, we've been hearing a lot of people talking about, well, Parliament, National Assembly can't sit in a form of a third, meaning 133, to then continue with this business and effectively correct.
Yeah.
We're saying that in our papers, we don't believe that's true, because in order for a National Assembly to sit and exist and be duly constituted as per the Constitution, they need to meet the minimum threshold of 350.
Yeah.
And obviously the maximum of 400. Now, with that, you cannot, if you don't have a duly constituted or composed a National Assembly, in our view, then go about the business of the National Assembly. And even if it means you have to, correct, you cannot correct because, you're not yet duly constituted. So that is the angle, in effect, that you'll have seen in our papers that our attorneys have actually unpacked there.
So you dispute the fact that the allocation of who's going to that assembly has already been determined by the IEC. And your argument is that those are designated representatives because they have not sworn in, taken the oath, and therefore they are not members. Am I correct?
In effect, that's the view that's coming from our lawyers, that those are candidates. And remember, we've been talking about candidates that have not been sworn in as members of the National Assembly.
And there are then those of the view that the number doesn't have to be, as you say. There's nothing that would stop those who are there from being sworn in and carrying on with the business, and members of the MK can be sworn in later.
Well, the question is, would the National Assembly be duly constituted and composed? Because if you remove Mkhonto weSizwe, that would effectively lead to 342 seats, which still falls below the threshold. So how would they go about their business to even correct with a National Assembly that's not duly constituted or composed?
The Mkhonto weSizwe party is
that's the question we're raising here.
Is not removed.
And
it chooses not to participate.
Sorry, what's that?
I'm saying Mkhonto weSizwe party has not been removed. It chooses not to participate.
No, it's very difficult to hear you, Thabo. I mean, I guess the line is
I'm saying, as Mkhonto weSizwe, you have not been removed from the National Assembly. You are opting not to participate out of your own volition.
No, we're saying that we have a serious issue here in a form of the elections, which were rigged. And these elections are not a true reflection of the kind of seats that we ought to be having in the first place. And as we mentioned, based on our submissions of the IEC, there's damning evidence that demonstrate that these elections were rigged. So this was not a free and fair process. And as far as we're concerned, we ought to be having more seats. So, and here's the reality. You can't claim that the elections are rigged and then still participate, off the back of the same elections and the results that came from the same elections which were rigged. I mean, that would be an oxymoron, participating and questioning. No, that's an oxymoron. So the reality is, how is it possible that, knowing very well that the IEC went and made declaration of results in a rush, stating that it was because of the markets? I mean, what happened to the voter of the South Africa's vote? What happened to the South African who legitimately, went and voted for a specific party that they wanted represented in government? What happened to those votes? And the thing is, we're raising this issue because we're saying, gone are the days when we as South Africans should be taking things lightly. Why are we so nonchalant about the fact that we are actually wanting to swear people in off the back of a rigged election? Why? What is this rush?
All right,
what about
let's try this. Nhlamulo, I think your volume on your device, because on my side they say they've tried everything to boost my level. Your device volume could be a little bit lower. Try and boost it if you can, so that we can improve audibility. So the question that's been asked, I see, by some is, why did you opt not to present that evidence of rigging in this Part A of the application?
Why did we opt to not
produce that evidence of the rigging that you are talking about in the Part A? Because you say in your papers the evidence will be produced at a later stage.
Well, we are going to produce the evidence. There's nothing more to that. I mean, you can't make claims and not produce evidence. We're saying, in the same way we produced evidence to the IEC, we'll produce evidence in a form of recordings, in a form of documentation, and everything that we have piled up. And here's another important point here. Remember, this is not just objections that were raised by Mkhonto Wesizwe alone. These are objections that were raised by other political parties who also felt that these elections were not free and fair because of a lot of discrepancies that were picked up. And that's the reality of what we're dealing with here. So all that evidence is certainly going to be gathered. It has been submitted accordingly and will be looked at.
I don't know other parties. I won't claim that I've spoken to all of them, but one of those parties is Al Jama, and I asked them exactly that question yesterday to say, you were part of those who said there was allegations of rigging in the elections, especially in KZN and some parts of Johannesburg. They said to me yesterday, well, we accepted the response from the IEC that the amount of those votes would be immaterial.
Again, my point, the mere fact that we can take a person's vote, undermine it, trample on it, and say that they are irrelevant or, immaterial, what is that? Is that what we've been reduced to as a society? Where we're going to undermine the right of a citizen, legitimate right, for them to choose the party that they want? No. That's what needs to come to an end. And that's what part of this process aims to do. We cannot be taking things nonchalantly, as we always have been. One vote alone is that one vote that disappears is that of a South African whose legitimate right has been trampled on. Why must we allow that?
So we
know that in our case, it's not just one vote. We know it runs into hundreds and thousands, let alone millions of votes. What we know, off the back of what happened also in terms of what the system glitch, in effect, if you put it in inverted commas, when that took place. We know what exactly happened there.
So you're basing your
calculation. Technicians that are discussing this to that effect.
Yeah, I'm saying you're basing your calculation on those millions, at least hundreds of thousands, on the fact that there were 579 disputes, and you're saying one of them would have at least constituted 1,000 votes, to the point where the IEC said, let there be a recount, and you're using that as a platform to say you could possibly have 579,000 votes. But are you considering that the voting districts and stations are not necessarily the same. Some might not even carry 1,000 votes.
Again, Thabo, I can't hear you 100%. But if I hear you clearly, you're asking about, am I saying that regardless of those votes, you're still saying that, is that what you're saying? That it's still immaterial?
No, I'm saying how do you come to the calculation of 579,000 to 1 million?
579,000.
579,000.
I can't hear you clearly.
500,000 to 1 million, 579,000, as you are mentioning in your papers. You're saying because one of the recounts would have included 1,000 votes, and you are collating those 1,000 votes to say, well, if there are 579 disputes, therefore we could have lost 579,000 votes.
Yes, I mean, here's the reality. We've demonstrated in the evidence that there's discrepancies relating to what was issued by and captured by our party agents versus what is captured in the system. We've gotten that. We've done the numbers. We've done the calculations. And the numbers don't tally. That's the issue we're raising here. And you would have picked up that not only with Mkhonto Wesizwe, but multiple other parties have stated the same. I mean, we have VDs in KZN alone where we know we won 100%, 90%. What happened to those votes? But then yet, 2,000 votes that were 2,800 votes that were captured in a specific VD are recorded as zero on the IEC system. Why?
And did you present that evidence
those kind of discrepancies lead to these kind of numbers. And you know very well, for instance, just in KZN alone, based on the coverage and the vote, you cannot question the results and us issues as we have, just on KZN alone.
Did you present that evidence to the IEC to a point where you're saying you've not received any response from it?
All the evidence. This is not a baseless case. This is a case that holds water. And it's important that we raise these issues and back them up. And that's exactly what this information does and this evidence does. It backs up our legitimate concern, our legitimate right to get our votes back.
As we let you go, have other parties, except for the ANC, approached you about attending the first sitting of the National Assembly on Friday? Like EFF, have they approached you?
We are speaking to all political parties regarding coalitions. We're engaging them. And that's what it is. That's where we're at right now, whilst following a parallel, concurrent process, in terms of submitting papers and interdicting the first sitting of the National Assembly. That's where we're at right now.
But my question is a little bit more on the first sitting. Has the EFF reached out to you to convince you to be a part of the first sitting?
Why would the EFF, out of all parties, convince us to come and sit in the first sitting? I don't understand what your questioning is.
No, have they asked you to be a part of it?
No, I'm saying to you, we are having discussions around coalitions. Why would they ask us to have a sitting in the first sitting when we've just submitted, papers to the effect that we don't want the first sitting to take place in the first place? I mean, why would I'm trying to understand your questioning.
Because
we're engaging with political parties,
you could be engaging,
having discussions and engagements with them for potential coalitions.
Yes.
On the other end, we've submitted documentation that states that this sitting is not constitutional. So why would someone want to come and convince us when there's paper that we've submitted that state that we don't want this sitting to happen?
Could you be engaging on the potential of fielding your own candidate for president? I mean, they could say, let's go on Friday together and field a candidate for president.
They could say that what? They want us to go and?
Go together with them and other parties and field a candidate for president on Friday.
Look, those are engagements and discussions that are being had, in the coalition engagements. And the outcomes thereof will be communicated accordingly. At this point, it is what it is. There's a process that's been submitted to say that this National Assembly sitting must not go ahead. And in this side, we're engaging with various political parties, looking at various scenarios. And based on the outcomes of that, we'll communicate accordingly.
Nhlamulo, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on this evening. He speaks on behalf of the Mkhonto Wesizwe party. Right, we'll get some legal analysis on that in a moment. Stay with us.